So you want to play Artio, but the only problem is you don't know how. Well, fret not, because I'm going to teach you how to play, build, and level her all in this video, so let's go ahead and get into it. Let's talk about Artio's passive Decompose. Now, every time she hits an enemy with an ability, it lowers their magical and physical protections by 2%. This could stack up to 6 times, lowering their protections up to 12%, which is pretty useful, and it lasts for 6 entire seconds, which is pretty long. It's fairly simple. Your protections get lowered by her abilities. Let's go ahead and move on. I'm going to start off with Artio's ultimate. Now, this is a little weird, but for Artio, it makes sense. She could change forms. This is Druid Form, and this is Bear Form, and each one of these forms, she has an entirely different extra 3 abilities. So, you have a whole bunch of abilities that do a bunch of different things. It's pretty cool. But Artio also has a secondary passive built into her ultimate. Now, each time she uses an ability, she gains a buff. As you can see, this gives me increased movement speed and MP5 based on how much I've leveled my ultimate. Now, I'm going to go through and go do all the Druid abilities and then go do all the Bear forms. So let's go ahead and do so. Artio's Druid Form 1 is pretty simple. It's a cone attack that heals herself and allies every time she hits an enemy god with the ability. It's pretty useful. It's simple. Let's move on. Artio's 2 is a circle that follows her around. It's like roots that come out of the ground that cripple enemies. They cannot jump away from you. They cannot leap. And it lasts for 6 entire seconds after you use the ability. Now, what's even cooler than that, you could switch into Bear Form and chase people down with it. And on top of all of that, it also decreases their power up to 15% at max rank, which is pretty cool. But let's go ahead and move on to her 3. Artio's Druid Form 3 heals herself and also slows and roots enemies. Now, this is how it works. It pulsates 5 times. If you can hit each 5 times, it'll root at the end of the ability. It also slows each time it pulsates, so they'll just get slower and slower until they're rooted. It's extremely annoying to play against, but let's move on to Artio's Bear Form abilities. Artio's Bear Form 1 is a cone attack that she swipes her claws twice. It deals damage. It actually could out-damage your Druid Form 1. It's a pretty useful ability, but let's go ahead and move on to her 2. Artio's Bear Form 2 is this AoE that stuns enemies for 1.4 seconds at max rank and also gives herself a buff that increases her magical and physical protections by 40 for 4 seconds, which is pretty useful. If you could position yourself correctly, you could stun the entire enemy team or prevent the enemies from hard pushing your backline. It's pretty useful, but let's go ahead and move on to her 3. Artio's 3 is a line attack where she charges forward, knocking into enemies. It's the way to run away from enemies. It's your escape. It also slows them at max rank up to 30%, and it's just a good way to get away or get into a fight if you really want to. But let's go ahead and move on to leveling. When playing Artio, I like to level her 1, then her 3, and then her 2. Now, the thing with Artio, you do not want to level her ultimate until the very end. You want to put that off as far as you can because you're wasting points, because you could use your ultimate at level 1 because it's just you switching forms. Now, the first ability I like to max out is her 1 and then her 3. I put points into her 2 and then going back and forth in between her 2 and 4, her ultimate, leveling them back and forth until they're both maxed out. I forgot to put this part in the video, but I might as well put it in here now. Now, when playing Artio, when you use an ability, you could see her abilities on this little gauge on her screen in between forms. So if I'm in Druid Form, I can see my Bear Form abilities. I thought that was cool and worth mentioning because it's pretty useful, especially if you're, waiting on an ability. But let's go ahead and, move on to building. Before we get into the build portion of the video, if you guys like this type of content, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And thank you for getting this far in the video. Hopefully, you'll like it enough to watch it to the end. But let's go ahead and get into the build portion of the video. Artio has 2 ways to play her. Support, hybrid. I'll be focusing mainly on support, but I'll be mentioning items that are good and cool and fun to play with on Artio when you're playing hybrid. Now, I like going Sentinel's Gift or War Flag. Both are great items. And, Tainted Steel is very valid for anybody who is building or has any healing items or just has healing built into their kit like Afro. Now, when you're playing hybrid, Warrior's Axe is good. And Vampiric Shroud, you could go Tainted Steel if you're on the solo lane for countering enemies. It's pretty useful. But let's go ahead and get into it. Gauntlet of Thebes is just an awesome item. It's just really good. Gives you 250 health and 15 HP 5. And when you stack it, you throw extra 55 magical and physical protections on there. It's extremely useful. But let's move on to Emperor's Armor, my other really favorite item to build on just tanks in general. It gives you 300 health and 60 physical protections. Emperor's Armor's passive is where it's at. It's great because it increases your towers and Phoenix's attack speed by 50%. People diving your towers will get eviscerated by them, and Phoenixes, of course. Now, it's also great for diving because it lowers enemies' towers and Phoenixes by 30% their attack speed anyway. It's extremely good. It's a nice item. But next item I like to get is Breastplate of Valor, giving you 65 physical protection, 300 mana, 10 MP5, and 20% cooldown reductions. And the glyph form I like to go for is Breastplate of Determination, because you get hit with abilities that are physical or magical, and, you know, it gives you an insane boost of movement speed, and you get double of the protections for 8 seconds. It's a nice item to have. You could go Breastplate of Vigilance. It's just like, meh. I don't really care for it. I prefer Breastplate of Determination. Next item I like to get is Genji's Garb, giving you 150 health, 70 magical protections, 40 MP5, and 10% cooldown reductions. And each time you're hit by a magical ability, it reduces your cooldowns by 3 seconds. Every 30 seconds it can occur. It goes on a cooldown time. Now, with your insane cooldowns, you'll be able to just pop off and unleash insane CC. This is where Manticore Spike comes in. Manticore Spike is really good, giving you 35 physical and magical protections. 35 physical and magical protections, 300 health, and 20 MP5. Now, it's really good because each time you hit someone with a hard crowd control, which is your 2, I think on both forms, and your 3 in Druid Form for sure, 100%. It's really good because it drops this spike on the ground. If you pick up that spike, it gives your allies and or yourself bonus damage based off your or their HP. Whoever picks it up, it's based off your HP. It's really good, especially if you're playing on the solo lane. It's actually kind of wacky. Really good on tank and hybrid form, so it gives you some bulk. It's really good. Other really good items you could get are Pythagoras Piece, which is nice on Artio because you already heal yourself, but also, you know, having a little extra lifesteal for you and your allies. It's quite nice. Stone of Binding works well because every time you hit an enemy with a crowd control, it places a debuff on them, lowering their physical and magical protections by 10 for 5 seconds. Juniper's Crown lowers physical power in an area around you by 15%. And of course, Spirit Robe is just a good item. Pestilence also works really well. If you want to switch out Manticore Spike for Spirit Robe, you can. I'm going to quickly make a hybrid build that I would use on Conquest right now and go ahead and just walk you through it real quick. So I'm going to go do that. This is it here, boys, right here. It's kind of wacky and wild, but here it is, boys. Bloodstroke, Shroud, Lifesteal. I'm going to quickly go through this anyway. Juniper's Crown gives you some bulk. It's nice. Pythagoras Piece, Lifesteal. This helps with protections. It also gives you a little bit of protections itself and magical power. These two cooldown reductions, you could go Chronos or throw something wacky or wild if you want to go full-blown damage. But I'm trying to stay more hybrid where you will also be like a bruiser and not really a tank. Ethereal Staff works really well. Warlock Sash could work awesome on this lady because Warlock Sash is kind of busted. But anyway, if you guys like this type of content, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys later.